Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We're pleased to welcome you to another webinar organized by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN. We want to seize this opportunity to thank everyone who joined our first webinar, held exactly 2 weeks ago. We trust that you gained a lot of insights from the session, as well as the guidance notes that will be released subsequently. ICSAN is a leading recognized professional body in Nigeria dedicated to enhancing the status and practice of corporate governance and public administration. It is the only professional body authorized in Nigeria to conduct the examinations leading to the qualification of chartered secretaries and administrators. The Institute is a member of the Corporate Secretaries International Association, a Hong Kong registered global organization dedicated to developing and growing the study and practice of secretaryship to improve professional standards, the quality of governance practice, and to improve organizational performance. The association is the global voice of corporate secretaries and governance professionals globally. One of our objectives as an institute is to develop and promote the professional ideals, standards, ethics, code of conduct, and the interests of the chartered governance professionals. Now, the reality is that there's a new way of working which has emerged over the last couple of months. It's no longer news. And it has affected all of our regular transactions, engagements, and routine corporate meetings. Today's discussion is therefore apt, holding AGMs of publicly quoted companies using proxies, how to balance the interests of investors and the companies. Now, COVID-19 is indeed a root shock, and it has created so many complexities. It has disrupted the status quo and has created a lot of uncertainties in our world. It is affecting every aspect of our lives, including our corporate transactions, particularly the annual general. So today's public companies in Nigeria will normally hold their AGMs between the first and second quarters of the year, following the year-end audits that would have been conducted within the first 3 months, 90 days of the accounts. However, COVID-19 is changing our plans, and there is a call for all stakeholders to come to the table to discuss, to decide, and show us the way forward. We're glad to welcome all of our participants. We have you joining us from all over the world. We're happy to host our colleagues and friends from the US. We have people from UK, from Ghana, from Saudi Arabia, Kenya, and yes, I've mentioned the UK joining us on this call. We can see that from the back end. Now, we have the honor and privilege to welcome our distinguished panelists. We have a combination of our regulators and key stakeholders in the capital markets. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Ms. Tinu Ade Awe, I beg your pardon, Executive Director, Regulations, the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Ms. Awe, we're pleased to have you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. We have Mrs. Anastesia Braimoh, the Legal Advisor, Head of Legal, Securities and Exchange Commission. Madam, we're pleased to have you. We also have my own sister, Mrs. Abidemi Ademola, the General Counsel and Company Secretary, Ghana and Nigeria, Unilever. Abidemi, we're pleased to have you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Mr. AbdulHakeem Mohammed, Director Compliance, the Corporate Affairs Commission. We're pleased to have you, sir. I hope he's joined the call. I've been looking for him. Are you here, sir? Okay. Then we have Mr. Nomah, Chief Equity Analyst and the CEO of Palesa Capital Market Association Limited. Mr. Awo, are you here? But in the interim, I would like to invite our chief host, the president of FCIS. You can please unmute yourself.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you once again to this webinar. I welcome the council members of the Institute of Chartered Securities and Administrators of Nigeria to this webinar. I also welcome the President of Corporate Secretaries International Association, my counterparts in other parts of the world, President of Chartered Institute of Secretaries and Administrators with their members, and our distinguished participants. And also let me thank in advance Mrs. Laseinde for accepting to moderate this particular webinar. We all know the effects of COVID on corporate meetings as at now. It's no longer a new thing. It's something that we discuss on a regular basis. It's preventing companies from holding their AGMs because of the restriction on mass gathering put in place by the states and also the federal government, which has made it almost impossible for the AGMs of companies to be held the usual way. And it was as a result of that that the Corporate Affairs Commission issued guidelines to find something like an interim measure to assist companies to hold their AGMs. With these guidelines, we have concerns expressed by investors who are of the view that they are not able to attend the meetings of their companies as they used to do. And also the companies have expressed concerns that they are not sure of the level of compliance with this kind of interim measure put in place. Basically, as a result of this particular concern, so there have been hesitations on the side of the company in a way that they have not been in the position to take a firm decision to hold their AGMs. Yes, some banks have held their AGMs under this guideline with their subsidiaries, but you discover that other companies in the other sectors of the economy, they decided to adopt the approach of maybe wait and see, and some have decided to postpone their AGM. However, today we have a unique opportunity in the sense that we are not talking about the challenge of COVID-19. We will be looking at the opportunity that it has provided for us. And the unique opportunity we have here today is that for the first time, maybe in our generation, we are confronted with a unique problem, and we have that unique opportunity to find solution to the problem today. For those of us who are lawyers, we are used to precedents. Cases decided in the 16th centuries are being used to regulate or determine current cases, which is, we refer to it as judicial precedent. And now we have the opportunity of finding a solution to a unique problem today, which will guide future generations. And I think that is the opportunity that we want us to look at and jointly find a solution in order to navigate and have our corporate meetings, particularly the AGM. So the purpose of putting this webinar in place by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria is to find solution to the challenge. I will not be talking about the challenge because we've expressed, and its various stakeholders have expressed their concerns regarding the mass restriction and also the guidelines issued by the Corporate Affairs Commission. Also, another unique opportunity we have today is that we have the regulators coming together. The Corporate Affairs Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, coming together to sit with the investors, representatives of the investors, and also of companies, in order to jointly find a solution. I don't think this is a regular development, but it's a nice development that we should sustain going forward. And what we have done as an institute, because we are always looking at how to find solutions to problems. We are not interested in talking about the problems alone. We ask 3 basic questions when you are registering for the program. And those basic questions are basically to enable us have an idea of the views of the stakeholders on what should be done. The good thing is that a lot of our participants, they've actually watched or participated in AGM by Proxies. And basically, when we now ask them, what would be their recommendations towards finding a win-win solution for both the investors and the companies? And I am impressed with the suggestions profile. In fact, with those suggestions, I think the problem is half solved. I will just give you the key highlights of the summary of their recommendations. Some are long-term, some are medium-term, some can be done immediately. Some of these recommendations are CAMA should be amended. In the meantime, they say the Articles of Association of Companies should be amended to accommodate the shareholders, to accommodate virtual meetings. Apart from that, they suggested that shareholders should be allowed to participate in AGMs real time, so that involvement is there and they are not maybe put in the position of being an observer. Others also suggested that the government should come up with a coronavirus act, as was done in UK and in Switzerland, so as to allow companies to hold their AGMs under this dispensation. Others, a majority, suggested that AGMs of companies should not be limited to the consideration of ordinary business. That special business, the usual business of the company should be considered, because this particular AGM under the guideline should be the same AGM that is known to the Companies and Allied Matters Act. Others also suggested that the Proxies that are recommended at the moment should be spread across the various shades of shareholder groups, so that it will not be limited to a particular group of shareholders. And one unique recommendation, which I want all stakeholders to consider, and a lot of them said, when we are looking for Proxies, that there could be no other better Proxies to be nominated other than the representatives of the shareholders on the audit committee. That after all, they are representing shareholders. So why should they not be appointed as Proxies for the shareholders when AGMs are to be held by using Proxies? So these are some of the recommendations they are proffered. And I think with these recommendations and the other initiatives that the regulators will be considering and also be putting in place today, we should be in a position to find solutions to this problem, so that companies that have put their AGMs on hold will actually go ahead with their AGM as planned. Those that are yet to make up their mind, they will be able to make up their mind because they now know that we have an approach that is compliant, that is participatory, that is accommodating, and will be in a situation as to accommodate all the various concerns of the stakeholders. So it is nice, and that is why, because of the interest generated by this topic, that as at this morning, we have more than 600 participants who have registered for this program. And as at now, 334 participants have joined, and I know a lot will still join during the program. And at the end of this exercise, I'm confident that we should be able to find solutions, and the Institute of Charter Secretaries will release a communique summarizing the key highlights, particularly the long-term steps that are to be taken, like the amendment of CAMA, so that we have this robust engagement with the relevant authorities, and then we will ensure that in case we have a repeat of coronavirus, God forbid, in future, we have an answer to it. And it's on that note that I welcome all participants to this program, and I hand over these proceedings to the moderator for her to continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my president. That was really spot on and is giving the direction on how today's session will go. So I would like to just encourage our participants to please minimize distractions around you. If you need to switch off your video so that you can key in properly into this conversations we'll be having now, please do so. And may I also remind you that the chat room is there. If you want to drop your questions, comments, we'll pick everything up from there. I would like to acknowledge Mr. Nomah Awo. Mr. Nomah Awo just joined. I'm still looking for Mr. Nomah Awo. Can we just hear from you? Can you just test your mic for 1 second? You have to unmute yourself.
I heard the president talk earlier, but now that the vice president have taken over power, I'm hoping that before long, she will hand over power to the original owner.
I'm not the vice president, so it's good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. Do we have Mr. Mohammed, AbdulHakeem? Do we have you now, sir? Okay, we'll just quickly proceed. I'm sure that we'll have Mr. Mohammed join us in a minute. I would like the first question to go to Ms. Tinu. So, Madam, we'd like to know from your end if there are any provisions in the Nigerian Stock Exchange listing rules, the NSE rulebook, and the circulars that have envisaged the challenge that COVID-19 is posing to AGMs, which have made it difficult for shareholders to attend such meetings physically due to the restriction on mass gatherings. I'd like to hear from you, Madam.
Thank you very much, and thank you once again for having me at this on this webinar. I think the simple answer to your question is no, and I think that if we're following from what you had said in your introductory statements, as well as the information that went out for this meeting and what the President had said, we are facing very uncertain times. This is not a challenge, I think, that anybody had envisaged. And so our rules did not envisage that we will be in this type of situation. But I also believe that our rules are robust enough and that our rulemaking process is responsive enough that we haven't been silent as this has gone by. We've been very proactive since this started to try and bring some relief to our stakeholders. So I'll leave it at that for now.
All right, I'd like to move on to Mrs. Braimoh. We'd like to hear from you. Same question. This is act this or anything at all, the circular, the memo. We'd like to hear from you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. I don't think anybody envisaged that anything like this would ever happen in the world, not to talk of Nigeria. So there is no way our laws, in one way or the other, would have accommodated such an event. So the provisions of the ICSAN does not have any provisions to guide on virtual meetings or handling such matters. But in the rules and regulations of the Commission, we have some rules on Proxies, which is mirrored with the provisions of CAMA, the Companies and Allied Matters Act. And some of them can be amended or put in place in these circumstances. So hitting the nail on the head, we don't have a rule that can apply to what is happening right now regarding AGMs and use of proxies. But for proxies, we have provisions in the rules and regulations that guide the use of proxies at AGMs. So that's my response to the question.
Thank you. We'll stay with you, Matt. Any initiative that the Securities and Exchange Commission has developed since March 2020 to support this same conversation on holding of AGMs? We would like you to share with us if there have been.
Yes, we on the onset of the lockdown, the SEC sent out circulars. I think can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. On the onset of the lockdown, the Commission sent out circulars and notices to the public and to public companies and capital market officials on what should operate at this time. And one of the messages we sent out was with regards to extending the period within which public companies should file their audited reports and also their first quarter 2020 report. It was extended by 60 days. And I think the NSE did the same as well. And we also sent out a notice there letting public companies know that the new guidelines, CAC guidelines on holding AGMs by proxies was in place, and they could explore that if they intended to hold their AGMs. And we also told them that holding their AGMs should also comply with the federal government directives as regards restrictions on gatherings, and also ensure that every provision of CAMA that had to do with holding AGMs by proxies and also in the ICSAN rules and regulations should be complied with. So in all, that their activities should still go on, but in compliance with the prevailing laws and the guidelines that have been issued by the federal government or the health authorities. Basically, that's what we've done so far. We have also told them that there's a need for them to make disclosures as to their business continuity or what they're doing in their companies. Let their stakeholders know, let investors know what is happening. And such disclosures should be put on their website so that everybody knows what's happening at this time in their operations. So basically, that's what we've done, and that we're open to suggestions, we're open to hear them or any concerns that they have, to address whatever concerns they have. So basically, that's the information we have put out there since the restriction of movement of this pandemic started.
Thank you so much, Madam. That is really, really assuring to know that it's because of this peculiar situation. We are open to learning and sharing, and also we can always access your office. Thank you so much. I can see Mr. AbdulHakeem Mohammed. He's just joined us. I would like to quickly move on to also share with Nigerian Stock Exchange, as introduced, to minimize the impact of COVID on AGMs since this pandemic started. Ms. Awe, please.
Sorry. We've issued a number of circulars as well that basically provide guidance and direction to help listed companies to deal with this pandemic, and indeed our entire ecosystem as well. So with respect to listed companies, one of the first things that we were concerned about was that the financial reporting timelines obviously may be impacted. So we gave certain extensions, 60-day extensions, and that is seems to be the practice around the world. As Mrs. Braimoh had told you, the SEC also gave that for all public companies. We've also extended time on quarterly financial returns, because under our rules, if you've not filed your audited, you can't file the quarterly financials. And so there's that accommodation. Under our thought leadership series, and not necessarily in our position as a regulator, we also issued some guidance around virtual meetings. Now, these are not virtual, this is not a guidance for virtual AGMs, it's a guidance for other meetings, so that the governance structure of the company is not completely undermined by COVID-19. We've also been very open, as we always are, to folks who come and have conversations with us. So we've had definitely quite a number of conversations with listed companies, representatives of listed companies, helping them to think through the issues. Also, because we have a set of rules called the Related Party Transaction Rules, we've provided some accommodation around what companies can do if they had intended to take related party transaction general mandate resolutions to their AGMs, because those are clearly special business. And under the rubric that has been provided, guidance from the CAC, the AGMs that we're having now, which are the proxy AGMs, you cannot have special business. And so we knew that that would impact our stakeholders, our listed companies, and so we provided a waiver and another angle for them to be able to still fulfill those purposes. So it's basically an unfolding situation. We remain open, and we're constantly looking what else is it that we can do to alleviate whatever challenges people may be facing around this situation. And we're also constantly scouring what regulators in other countries are doing in order to alleviate the concerns. Thank you.
Ms. Awe, if I can just interrupt you a bit.
Yes.
Our participants are struggling to hear you. So if you could just please repeat your few last points and speak louder into your mic.
Speak louder. Okay.
That would be appreciated.
So my mother always
Yes,
told
please.
me I had a loud voice as a child, so I think I'll bring it to play now. So what I was saying is that we it provided an extension of time on financial reporting. So both the audited financials as well as the quarterly financials, we've extended time on that. We've also provided accommodations in connection with our related party transaction rules. And the reason for that is because the CAC guidelines only allow companies to have ordinary business on the agenda of these proxy meetings. And since general mandate resolutions and other resolutions under our related party transaction rules are special business, we needed to provide that accommodation so that companies' operations will not grind to a halt. I think the last point that I made very quickly is also that we're open, and we have been talking to representatives of listed companies, trying to help them to think through the issues, and obviously in constant communication with the SEC and any other regulator or entity that we feel can help to bring succor and guidance to folks in this very critical and challenging situation that we all find ourselves.
Thank you so much, Ms. Awe. It is very, very assuring that the dialogue is ongoing, and a lot of us can testify to that, to the fact that you do have open door policy explained, really assuring. It's really heartwarming to know that we can always leverage on that. Thank you so much for that. I still need to bring Mr. AbdulHakeem Mohammed on. I don't know if he can just speak into his mic now so that we can take his viewpoints on some of the points we have raised. But while we're waiting for Mr. Mohammed to join us, I want Mrs. Ademola Abidemi to please share with us the views and any concern that the companies may have on the various initiatives, including the changes that they want the regulatory agencies to make to these initiatives, so that we can hold our AGMs as soon as possible. Mrs. Ademola, please.
All right, thank you, Abiola. I think I'll first of all say thank you to our regulators for how they've swiftly, responded and to the unprecedented situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're grateful for all the circulars and all the guidelines that we've received, and we've engaged, one-on-one, not clear. And, we're really grateful that, we have regulators that we can talk to guide us. The situation, though, is that some AGMs have held, and we've attended some of those AGMs. And the concern of the company, from the point of the company, is whether really we would not have maybe a shareholder a few years down the line challenging as to the fact that they were disenfranchised to attend the meeting in one way or the other, or to participate. So that's where our greatest concern has been in terms of, in terms of looking at all the AGMs that I've held, do we feel that, the requirements of CAMA have been complied with in terms of the right of the shareholder to attend and participate at the meeting? So that's the first thing. And because of that, we're wondering whether, there can be a provision that allows, virtual meetings, which allows, and I've seen some of those companies actually use the virtual means to make the AGMs more participatory, so that the shareholders are able to observe and they are also able to participate in. So that's one of the things that we'll be asking for, to say, I know we've done some things. Is it possible within the current framework, whether under the various enabling laws that the regulators have, whether they can make some regulations around this? And then the other bit is around, our other concern is also around limiting the business to be transacted at the AGM to just the ordinary business. So if you look at the provisions of the CAMA in section 214, we know the ordinary business has been listed in there, but there are also situations where, and I know that spoken about, the palliative that they've offered in terms of waiving the Rule 20 and 20.8 of the relating on the rules relating to related parties transaction. However, there are other things, like for instance, now there are companies who haven't seen this. We know that the pandemic wasn't a situation that people envisaged. So I haven't seen this now. We're looking at it and say, should we be amending our articles, for instance, to allow virtual meetings? Should we be amending should we be issuing bonuses if, for instance, we don't want to issue, we don't want to declare dividends? So there are many other businesses that fall within special business category that companies would also want to table at the AGMs. And we're wondering that if we just go by the CAC guidelines, we will be inhibited, to be able to do that. So that's another concern that we have. And that's one of the recommendations that we'll be making to say, is it possible, for the CAC to also relax that guideline and allow some special business items to be taken at the AGMs? So for instance, if you are allowed to do some of those, to take some of those special business, then we will be able to change our articles, amend our articles. We will be able to pass some special resolutions that allow us to also manage properly the situation that we're in right now. So that's those are, to me, areas that we have felt the most concern about. We've looked at the situation in Switzerland and in the UK and how they've passed, laws that have enabled their companies to run virtual AGMs, definitely under certain guidelines. And we're asking ourselves that what is stopping us in Nigeria from adopting the same approach? We have the stimulus bill before the National Assembly. We have the KAMA that is being amended. We feel that while we did not envisage this sort of situation, it has happened on us now. So we have the vantage opportunity to amend our laws to accommodate this sort of situation in the event it happens. And it might not be, nobody's praying for coronavirus situation, but it might be some other things that happen and we're not able to meet physically. So what do we do? So that's basically it from my end. There are other issues, but I think at this time we want to focus on the most important ones.
Thank you so much, Abidemi. Thank you. You have spoken our hearts. It's really, really a painful moment right now, and you have raised a lot of points that I know that both Ms. Awe and Mr. Braimoh have taken notes of, because I will be giving them the opportunity to respond to some of the issues you have raised. There are a lot of the key elements of some of the points you have made will be taken. Now, I want to call on Mr. Nona Awu to also give us the perspective, key representative. So mute your mic.
Okay. I didn't hear your question, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, your perspective, regulators have introduced during this pandemic regarding our AGMs. Yes, we would like your point of view as a key representative.
Okay. First, I must commend
representative of the investors.
Yes, I must commend the various regulators. Yes, I said I must commend the various regulators who are being represented on this discussion. Because the reason that this is important for me is that we must learn to talk much more to ourselves, because the market belongs to all of us, both the regulated and the regulator. But in that line, I want to join Abidemi in the aspect of the special business. And the reason that I want to start with the special business is because there's an industry that will be most hit in all of these developments. The insurance sector, yes, there's been a talk around extending the period for which their recapitalization can be concluded. But one of the things that we're going to find is that even with that extension, they will not be able to have any special business on an acquisition or merger. For those of them, so far, I think 3 or 4 companies have indicated interest in having bonus issues, and one of them again happens to be an insurance company. That itself may be a challenge, should that aspect not be looked at. But in terms of the area of the virtual AGM, I also think that CAC was probably a little in a hurry in the provision that they gave, because from my understanding of that circular, what they have is it's an hybrid of in-person, okay, and visual. So it's a hybrid, but the approach that how the approval has also gone is also indicating as if, you can do any, and I don't think that is correct. And that's why for me, I also find it strange that for CAC to be able to understand the challenges that the regulated are going through, it will have been important for them to attend a couple of the AGMs that they themselves even approved. And so not finding them at any of those AGM also became a concern for me. But talking about the issue of proxy, again, some abuses, because I don't think it is right for all that will be having proxy. The proxies themselves will be all the directors, and in some instances, I've also seen company secretary. And I'm asking myself, that's an abuse. Yes, some persons have said, the chairman of the audit committee, maybe, but also realizing that there will be election on the day of the AGM for the audit committee, and having to have the chairman also present proxy is also neither here or there. Because if you also look at the structure of audit committee generally in Nigeria, there's a high level of politics, if you like, because you find associations largely being the one presenting candidate for. So I will be expecting a situation where, given regulation and proper disclosure, the minority interest on the board, which unfortunately is also something that some of us have clamored for over the years, but regulators, especially CAC, has also not helped in such disclosure. Because if I know who the minority representative on the board is, that for me is much more consoling, if you like, in saying, look, you represent me, even if I don't think that the person I voted for in the audit committee should be the one carrying the proxy. But there is one major challenge that some of us have also seen in all of this virtual that we've seen. In the last how many minutes, we've had to struggle through in terms of technology. So going forward, it may be necessary to find a way of making sure that this aspect is also better accommodated, so we can have, even with in-person AGM, that we should find a way of accommodating out-of-town shareholders who also will probably have contribution to make for the progress of the company. Those will be my area of interest for now. But it's also important to mention that for some of these special business, especially that has to do with general mandates, I don't think that is much more of a challenge, because I've also seen what Nigerian Stock Exchange also put out in terms of direction. But I will be adding that rather than just allow the board of directors to approve the general mandate, that it should also be a provision that after the approval, that the board should be made to report the development in terms of general mandate on a quarter-to-quarter basis, so that shareholders can also know to what extent has the board committed to the company in terms of such transaction on a quarterly basis, rather than waiting until the end of the year, and then you are finding a situation where, situation that probably will have been arrested, so to say, is not arrested until after a 1 year position. So those will be my comments for now.
I'd like to check in with Mr. Ware if you would like to respond to any of the issues that both Abidemi and Mr. Awo have raised, respectively, from the point of view of the companies as well as the investors community from Mr. Nona Awo.
Okay, I will try to respond. I was trying to take notes, and I'm sure that I'll be reminded if it seems like I'm forgetting anything. Abidemi has said that the companies are facing very challenging times, and we agree. And I think all of us are facing challenging times, the regulators as well. And I think one of the things that she's pointed out is that there is a concern as to whether or not the proxy AGMs held under the guidelines by the CAC, whether they can be challenged in the future. Well, I think that each company has to review the guidelines and CAMA, and also its own risk management, its own risk management tolerance. If you look at the guidelines say something like, in view of the COVID-19 pandemic, companies can hold their AGMs. So companies, it's not, and so when people say that it's the guidelines are the CAC imposing a regulation, I always say, well, they're guidelines and they're things that you can do. The CAC is saying almost like a safe harbor. I'm not going to do anything to you if you do things according to these guidelines under these specified conditions. And so each company then has to decide, do I want to wait the 15 months that CAMA gives me, which I can apply to, I can still apply to the CAC for a 3-month extra, which will mean 18 months after my last AGM, or do I want to go along with this? And I think, so the CAC has been, I think, in a very interesting position in that it's come out to put something out, but it's not saying you have to do it. So I'll just like to make that very, very clear. And I don't think people should be compelled or to feel compelled that they have to use it. They should go through their own risk management and decide whether it's something that they want to do. So that's the first thing that I would like to say. And I think, and I'm not holding brief for the CAC because I'm sure that Mr. Hakeem will come and speak to that issue. But if I can just put my regulator hat on, and albeit we're a market regulator, we're not a government regulator. I think if you look at CAMA and you look at Section 214, it's very clear what kinds of things are plain vanilla. Those kinds of things are ordinary business. And I think that might be what the CAC was thinking when it said, for this guidance, for this safe harbor that I'm giving you, I will only go as far as ordinary business. But you're absolutely correct, Bimbo and Nona, that special business is important, particularly, I think, the insurance industry, everything that they want to do with the capital raisings that are there. And even if people want to change their constitutional documents, they need to have AGMs. So it's like a chicken and egg situation. And I absolutely agree that if we had the possibility of having a Swiss or UK type solution to this issue, where we could have specific rules in a law that is made for the purposes of COVID, then we can all use all this brain power that we've had from a number of webinars and guidances and what have you, and conversations that people have been having, to put together a set of rules that would be appropriate, using even the practice that we've seen in those jurisdictions as well. So that would be the ideal. I think people can also look at Section 233, where you can approach the court. And I think no better time now to approach the court than since yesterday the courts themselves have said, we too are going virtual. So appropriate shareholder representatives or director representatives under Section 233 can approach a court for an appropriate resolution in these, for the appropriate guidance to have an AGM in these circumstances. And I think, that may even, I would wager to say that may even be faster than the legislative process. And so I think we need to be inventive. Is that provision, for example, can we speak certain representative action into that provision? I don't know. But these are things that we can think about, because you can imagine if the Federal High Court gets such an application, potentially that application can be heard under a matter of urgency if you have appropriate affidavits to that effect. And, we get to a situation where it then becomes a template that other companies can use while we still go through the legislative process. The specific question, if I haven't answered it, about whether I think special business should be added onto the CAC guidelines, I have a sympathy with what the CAC has done. And so I think the CAC should answer that question itself, but I've set out two possibilities. One, the law, as Abidemi had said, I totally agree with that, or going to court under Section 233. With respect to the mandates, our related party transaction rules, which are always a topic of interest anytime when we're engaging with company secretaries. So I'm not surprised that it has come up again. We tried to give some accommodation under general mandate part. Again, if you want to bifurcate those rules into the specific transactions type as well as the general mandate type, and we felt that the general mandate type is a safer harbor to go for now to give that accommodation. And Nomah, we hear you with respect to the reporting. I believe that our circular also says that there should be notes about it, or at least that is something that we have on the table. So we're at this very moment, we're actually looking at that circular again, but we will not do anything without one, listening. So some of these conversations, and I'm sure the comments that we'll read after this will be helpful, and obviously engaging with the SEC as to whether this is an appropriate thing to do for the community. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Ms. Awe. Thank you. I'd like to call Mrs. Braimoh to also give our own perspective to some of the key elements of the points raised by both Abidemi and Mr. Nomah. You need to unmute your mic, please. Your mic.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me now? Okay, yes. I was saying that, like Tinu said, the guidelines are not mandatory. Like they say, they're just guidelines.
True.
Yes, they're not mandatory. And these guidelines wouldn't have been necessary if not for the situation we found ourselves, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected all spheres of our lives. So I think, I would also say I'm not holding brief for the CAC. I think it is because of the circumstances we're in to allow business to continue as usual, or as best as usual as possible. That is why I think the CAC came up with these guidelines, not to halt all operations of the company. And it's not mandatory. And I would like to speak to the rights of the shareholder. The only issue I see in the guidelines, or the concern of which I appreciate from all people that have complained, is the fact that it is the shareholder that should be able to pick a proxy by himself and not a proxy imposed on him. I think from where Mrs. Abidemi is coming from, the possibility of a shareholder going to court in future, I would think that is what would be of concern. And I think from the guidelines and also from the provisions of PAMA, as it were, the rights of the shareholder has I would say, been protected In the circumstances, what could happen is the gatherings have been restricted to 20 people. It's not possible for every shareholder to choose their proxies. What the CAC has done is public companies would come up with a list of proxies from where any shareholders can pick any person. I think the issue would be, and I don't think a shareholder would say out of the list of names that are provided, there is not one person the shareholder can pick to represent his interest. And apart from that, I am sure that proceedings at AGMs are either recorded, either by recording devices, or records are taken manually as to what happens at the meetings. And also the votes by these proxies are also recorded and documented. And I would think that if a shareholder gives a mandate to a proxy to vote in a particular manner, there is a way the shareholder can be able to check eventually to ensure that his input was taken into consideration, or the proxy voted in the way he or she wanted to vote. So I think for me, that concern has been taken care of. Because of the circumstances we found ourselves, it's not possible for AGMs to be held in the normal way, the traditional way that we've always seen AGMs held. And this is a hybrid.
That is in person.
It's left to the companies to take a decision whether to actually go ahead and apply the guidelines of the CAC, or wait until a time when it is proper, or when it is possible to have a normal AGM as we all know it. So it's left for public companies to actually take that decision. And then to comment on the issue of what Mr. Nomah said about the CAC guidelines on virtual meetings. Looking at the CAC guidelines, I don't really think it addresses virtual meetings. It doesn't say anything about virtual meetings. It just talks about AGM. Yes, it doesn't say anything about virtual meetings. So, and the CAC, the CAMA as it is now, hasn't also said anything about virtual meetings. There are a lot of arguments about whether indeed you can actually squeeze in or interpret the provisions of CAMA to allow virtual meetings. It's 50-50. Some people say yes, you can. Some people say you can't. So until there is a clear provision talking about virtual meetings, we just continue to have our meetings the way we're having. And so I don't know on what basis virtual meetings are being held right now. I don't know on what basis. Yes, for convenience, or to include shareholders that can actually join virtually. Because not all shareholders are computer literate. Even at this form right now, some of us are having problems joining and actually, you understand. So it's a conversation that we can continue to have now, but everybody has said, it needs to be legislated. The new CAMA provides that private companies can hold their AGMs virtually, but doesn't say anything about public companies. Yes, so this is the right time for CAC to actually push forward, and also other regulators, but particularly CAC, to ensure that before the bill becomes an act, there is a specific provision there saying that all companies can hold their meetings virtually. So it solves all these problems. The Commission is concerned about the comments that have been made on shareholders' rights and all that, but I would also want to throw it back at shareholders a bit.
Okay.
The shareholders he knows his rights, and I'm saying that if you know your rights, then make sure that you enforce your rights. If there's something the public company or your company in which you're a shareholder does not fly well with you, I think there are modes of communicating such concerns to that company. These CSC guidelines does not overrule or rule out shareholders' participation or contribution or concerns being communicated to a company where that shareholder holds as an investment. So irrespective of the guidelines, irrespective of the law, the shareholders' rights have not been overrode by the guidelines or by any secular or public notice put out there by the regulators. So I would urge shareholders, if you have a concern regarding what is happening right now, tell your company, tell your registrar, have a conversation with your company and like what we're having right now. We're trying to come up with solutions to fine-tune so that in future, if anything, things like this happen, there is a better way of handling it. I guess that's why we're having this webinar. So those are my comments for now. Okay, and finally, on this matter, Tinu mentioned a section in CAMA 233, which talks about allowing the courts for you to have meetings. There's another section in CAMA 213 for those. This will actually apply for those companies that don't want to take advantage of the CAC guidelines now. There is a provision there which allows them, either the company or a member, to go to court and ask the court to direct the company to have the meeting. And I feel, with my own interpretation, you can actually then have virtual meetings by virtue of this section, because it talks about the court making auxiliary or consequential directions as the commission thinks fit. That's even the commission CAC, including directions modifying or supplementing in relation to the calling, holding, and conducting of the meeting. So when you're giving directives as regards calling, holding, and conducting of a meeting, a directive can be given: conduct the meeting virtually. So I would even think, if you can interpret, you can actually use virtual meetings for that section. But this is when a meeting has not been called and a member of the company or a director wants a meeting to be called. That's where you can apply this section. So the law is made for man and not man for the law. So there are a lot of ways we can interpret the law to be able to suit exactly what we want. But we have to be careful to ensure that we actually respect the interests of shareholders. So this is a section that can be explored by public companies. I'm just bringing it out to the fore. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Braimoh. You've just opened another key element of the CAMA provisions. I'm sure that a lot of people will be thinking about CAMA, that a lot of people will be thinking about the moment. But I noticed that Abidemi wanted to say something before I move on, because I'm conscious that we need to begin to round up this webinar, and there's an important announcement and some other few things that we need to say. But Abidemi, you wanted to say something in response to what Mrs. Braimoh and Tinu said?
No, I think they then answered it, because they were talking about, virtual meetings and the fact that, currently we don't have a law in place for companies to use as a base to hold virtual meetings. So I was just going to respond when she said that, but both of them, Ms. Awe and they've gone ahead to talk about the fact that you can explore getting a court directive. My only worry with that is how soon and how quickly, and what will that entail? So that's one of the things that I am taking out of this now, to say, okay, do we want to go and explore that? But I'm just saying, rather than that, what's stopping us from ensuring it's in the CAMA bill right now? The CAMA bill is in the process of being passed. So, and we've waited a long time. I don't even know why it was restricted to only private companies. Because if you look at the US, the UK, the developing countries, the countries that were aspiring, to also be like, and that were borrowing other legislations from, like data privacy legislations, other competition law legislations, they've already gone ahead and they've provided for virtual meetings, because I think it's long overdue. We didn't need to wait for the pandemic to hit us. When I finish, so that this is long overdue. Guidelines will be put in there to ensure that the proper requirements are followed and it is not abused by companies. So I think that this is a really important point. I know that we can use the course as we've been advised, but I think it's very important that we find a way now to put in our laws. And there's the stimulus bill, or also before the National Assembly. What's stopping us from putting it there? Yeah, so that was my own sort of feedback. Thank you.
I would just want to add.
Thank you, Abidemi.
If you don't mind.
Yes, Mr. Will, go on, please.
Yes. when you talk about a private company, you are talking about shareholders not more than 50. When you are talking about a PLC, I've seen PLC with over 1 million shareholders. And that's basically why I talked about a mix of in-person, AGM, and virtual, so that you can have an hybrid. I think for now, an hybrid will be a much more ideal situation for our PLCs. Even with the sitting, some of us also know the abuses. You talked about, why picked Proxy from? The reason that all this pressure also came on CAC to have the guideline that we have, with due respect, is because there were a number of the key shareholders in those organizations. We are also looking towards, how quickly can I get my dividend? And like I said, a company, a PLC, is not only about dividends. It's much more about making sure that that company lives beyond today. And the more we continue to emphasize one small aspect of it, then it also becomes a challenge. Because like I said, even the retail shareholders are made to think that, all you should be interested in, the company has paid you dividends. And that's why we've also seen companies who are illiquid, sometimes between being alive and dead, and who still struggling to pay dividends. So my position will be, let's encourage the law in terms of PLC to have a mix, a hybrid, rather than just have, because again, if you also look at even the issue of annual accounts, a number of the AGMs that have been held, they tell you, go on our line and see, and you never get any annual account. So if you don't have an annual account, what contribution will you make other than having to vote and vote blindly? Because they think that, the only persons who can be proxy are persons who are on their own side. And like I said, we need to take a total look, and we need to begin to emphasize, now that we're talking about global, begin to look at much more how much of independent and minority representatives can come on our boards. Because the way very many of our boards are structured now is one person picking whoever he wants, and he thinks that's a board. Very many of us, especially for the financial institution, it's not going to be healthy for us in the long term. So that I want us to also consider when we're making our recommendations.
We're so glad to have you. Good morning, sir.
Oh, sorry, coming in late.
Yes, we're so glad to have you. I don't know at what point of the conversation we've had so far you joined, but the the conversations we've had so far has really been about what the CAC can do, your contributions, the initiatives you've taken since this pandemic started. So if you have time, I'm just going to allow you have a long session for about 10-15 minutes to speak through the various issues, the various initiatives, as well as if there are provisions in CAMA that companies can adopt for the challenging times and the peculiar situation.
Yes. Hello.
We've had so far. So over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, madam.
Mr. Mohammed, do you want me to repeat my?
I think what you are asking me to explain is what the Commission has done so far in view of this pandemic in relation to AGMs by proxies for public liability companies.
Can you hear me?
I'm there, madam.
Okay, I wanted to say that maybe we'll just take it from the beginning. The first question that has envisaged in view of the current pandemic, we just want you to tell us if there are any provisions anywhere in CAMA or in any guidelines that we've released so far that has envisaged the...
Yeah, there is a provision under the Companies and Allied Matters Act for companies to hold annual general meetings by way of proxies. And that is Section 230 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2004 Laws of the Federation. In fact, before the lockdown, we had a virtual meeting between us, the Honorable Minister of Trade and Investment, and the Minister of State, including the Director General, that's the PAMSEC of the ministry, together with the NSC, Nigerian Stock Exchange, the Securities and Exchange Commission. And in that meeting, we agreed that the commission should come up with guidelines. And we came up with some guidelines which we now published in our website, and which was agreed upon between the three regulatory bodies: the Securities and Exchange Commission, the NSE, and the Corporate Affairs Commission. And the people should try to distinguish between the guidelines issued by CAC and regulations. Regulations are made pursuant to Section 16 of the Companies and Allied Matters Act. And those regulations are done by the Honorable Minister. The Act specifically vests the power to make regulations to the Honorable Minister. So the Commission cannot make regulations. It can only issue guidelines in consonance with the provisions of the Companies and Allied Matters Act. And that was what we did.
The other question that Abiola raised was that before you joined, the representative of the investors and also the listed companies made some suggestions. One of those suggestions is that CAC should consider allowing companies to also put on the agenda of their AGMs as special business, so that they can transact the normal business items on the special business. Like, for example, if they want to increase share capital because of the situation we find ourselves, you're also aware that some companies are under obligation as at now to increase their share capital, for example, the banks. So what would be your reaction to that? Yes, the insurance companies.
The reason why we didn't say that special business should be transacted in these proxy meetings is because where you are now passing a special resolution, you know what is the majority? It's supposed to be by way of 2/3 majority, isn't it? But where it is an ordinary resolution, it can be done by a simple majority. Now, because it is a meeting by way of proxy, you cannot expect majority of the shareholders to be present at that meeting and now pass a special resolution. So instead, why don't you do the AGM first, and then those special businesses can be transacted at an EGM.
Okay.
Abiola is still having the challenge. I think the follow-up question would then be that it is not all the items under special business that require special resolution.
True. That's exactly where I was coming to.
So please, we need to distinguish that. They are under special business because they are not provided for under Section 214 of CAMA.
True.
But they will still be passed as ordinary resolution. So we need to consider that. Otherwise, you just use the same brush
for everything.
For everything. And that is the reason why a lot of companies are not comfortable with the present scenario.
Let me give a quick instance. Sorry, let me give a quick instance so you can take all of them together. For instance, in a number of companies will usually have their directors' emolument and fee approved on a yearly basis. Hello?
I'm hearing you.
Okay, so if you now say, because approval of directors' emolument is special business, then you don't approve anything, that also becomes a challenge. I know the likely answer you give, let them stay on the existing level. But if you also want where consideration have been made either to, this is the way to go, then it also becomes a challenge. Because we must also take cognizance of the fact that, yes, all of them that are PLC and Nigerian companies, but they also have foreign affiliates in all these that they do. And if we want to play globally, and then they see us as, this is what they do here, and they can't have an understanding, it also becomes a challenge. So I will want in your review, hoping that...
You see, there are three options in this matter. Okay. One is you hold this meeting under Section 230 by way of proxy. When you apply to CAC, and CAC will give you the consent to go ahead. Number two, where it is, you cannot hold the meeting within the 15 months. Yeah. Before the expiration of the 15 months, you are entitled to apply to the Commission under Section 213 for an extension of time within which to hold this AGM. Okay. Thirdly, you can apply to the court under Section 223, where it has become impracticable to hold the AGM. The court may, on its own or on the application of any member, gives direction as to how this meeting can be held. So if you think you want to hold this meeting by way of proxy and you want to pass a special resolution and we say no, you have other alternatives. You can come under Section 213 or you can come under Section 223. Section 213 gives the company the mandate to apply for an extension of time. Section 223, like now because of this pandemic, where it is impracticable to hold a meeting within this pandemic, you can apply to the Federal High Court and seek for an order under that provision. So it is very clear. We do not want a situation whereby a resolution will be passed at that meeting and some other shareholders will come and start challenging it. And that will nullify that meeting. So what is the purpose of even holding it in the first instance? That's why we limited it that, please, whatever business you want to transact should not be special business.
No, maybe a follow-up question, sir. It's just for you to consider. Companies would like to have one AGM and not split AGM. One AGM under this directive and then an extraordinary general meeting to consider special business. Because in that case, the implication of that is that such a company is an additional cost and big distraction. We appreciate a situation whereby we can just use this particular opportunity to transact the normal business of an AGM.
That is why I said it is not mandatory. It is not mandatory to hold this meeting by way of proxy. It is not mandatory. You have other options, and I have already mentioned the two options. So if you feel that you cannot do in accordance with our own regulations, not regulations, guidelines, then you try and explore the two other options.
So Alaji, just to clarify, what you're saying is that under no circumstance will you grant an approval, because I'm just wondering that since it's been clarified that the fact that an item is a special business agenda item, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be passed by ordinary resolution.
True.
Is it possible, and this is a guideline, which is not cast in stone, is not a regulation, is not something that cannot change. So if there are special circumstances, I just want to finish asking my question. Are there circumstances where you will consider, if a company brings an application, explain the whole situation? Mr. Nomah has touched on directors' remuneration. I didn't want to talk about it initially, so I'm happy that it's coming from a shareholder, and things like that are matters you want to consider. Even though it's a special business, it will be passed by ordinary resolution. Will the CAC at any point in time agree to that, even under the current AGM
arrangement?
Yes. Madam, we will accept it. Even increasing share capital is by way of ordinary resolution, isn't it? We will accept it if it is ordinary resolution, and if the law allows you to pass it by way of ordinary resolution.
You will be allowed. Thank you very much. I just needed that clarity.
It's good that you have provided the clarification, sir, that for any business under special resolution that will be passed by virtue of ordinary resolution, that will be allowed. That is good.
It will be allowed, sir.
Okay, sir. So the other thing also I want you to confirm is that since you said that this is a guideline, which is just a recommendation.
Yes.
So it means that company on their own can still decide to go ahead with their AGM and transact both the ordinary and special businesses.
Why not, sir? Provided those resolutions are ordinary resolutions.
The question the company will be asking is that there is no such limitation in KAMA.
Sir?
I said the question that the companies will be asking when you say that provided they are limited to ordinary resolution is that they will be saying there is no such limitation under the current Companies and Other Matters Act.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you suggesting that we should allow the companies to pass special resolution and in this kind of meetings?
I think so. With due respect, no, Alaji, with due respect,
the guidelines. You can.
No, Alaji, with due respect, I think you need to go. I think you need to relook that resolution, that component. By the way, let me also say that if you have a situation where AGMs are not held and shareholders don't give approval, one of the major things that I think that your commission also needs to look at is the possibility of government not getting income. Because if shareholders haven't approved an AGM, first, huh?
No, go ahead, sir.
Okay, those benefits will also not come to government. And whether we want it or not, in this time of these challenges, I think it's an aspect that we need to look at. Secondly, it's also important that government itself is concerned about the ability of companies to survive post this era. And one of the ways that some of those companies are going to survive, and I specifically mentioned the insurance subsector, is that they need to have additional funding for those of them who want to raise additional capital, or those of them that also want to have rearrangement, talking about merger and acquisition, and all of those specifically will be special business. So if you then said, oh, you can't do this special business, it also means that the two major position of government as to post-COVID will also be challenged. And I just want us to look at those two legs.
No problem, sir. We do not have any objection to that, sir. You see, what we are mainly concerned, sir, is that we don't want a situation whereby some shareholders, after this meeting, will now approach the court and start nullifying these meetings. That is our own concern. But we do not have any objection to all you are raising. In fact, before this meeting, sir, this virtual meeting, sir, we just responded to a letter from Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, and they raised all these concerns. We just wrote the reply, the response, and we sent it to them right now today, before this meeting. All these issues you raised, sir, they raised it in their own letter. So I will not say that this is the decision of the commission. Because I am only representing the commission by virtue of my office as the Director of Compliance. But I will advise, since the President is here, that maybe ICSAN, after this meeting, should also write us so that we reconsider the guidelines once again.
Okay.
Yes,
okay, I can give you an assurance. ICSAN will be willing to do that, to write so that we can move in tandem with the expectation. And as I said the other time, the good thing about this discussion is to find a solution. Nobody has been identified as being responsible for COVID-19. What we are trying to do is to clear the mess in such a way that we can move forward. And in doing so, we want all stakeholders to be flexible. Listening to the peculiarities. What we are used to, even as of February, all the companies, they have planned their AGMs, and it was based on the fact that we are going to consider a whole gamut of items under this dispensation. Now, COVID has come with its own challenges. So there will be a lot of amendments here and there, particularly the articles, for those who want to increase their share capital. So there should be no constraint. Otherwise, each company will now be compelled to hold 2 annual general meetings within a year. One under the guideline, the other one under the other dispensation that will allow your company to do what they are expected to do. So, but it's learning that all the regulators are speaking along that line to say we are flexible, we are open to suggestions, and we are willing to make amendments. And my expectation is that maybe immediately CSC receives this, for example, this proposal, ICSAN will issue a communique and write a letter as a follow-up to this. We should be in a position to get a revised guidelines from CSC early next week, so that companies that have suspended their AGMs, because you discover that only the banks are holding their AGMs and their subsidiaries. All other sectors, they have not, because they are concerned with the compliance level.
I assure you that if you can send the letter and we receive it on Monday, if you do not receive the reply that Monday, I assure you will receive it on Wednesday. Because
that would be excellent.
No, we respond to our mails promptly, sir.
Yeah. In fact, that would be excellent. I'm already giving you a pass mark ahead of your
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
I assure you, and these guidelines are amendable, sir.
Okay.
For the benefit of the companies and for all of us as regulators. And we don't want a situation where we will drag this matter, say, go to court and apply and all these things. No. If it is within our powers, we will do it, sir.
It's encouraging that we are having a very good impression of the Corporate Affairs Commission. You are a good ambassador, and what we have seen today, all the participants that are joining, we now know that we have a commission that is listening, a commission that is willing to assist stakeholders, a commission that is actually there for the interest of all stakeholders. So I give that assurance. ICSAN this weekend will send the letter on behalf of companies, because basically our responsibility as an institute set up by law is to promote corporate governance best practices. And we'll do whatever is required with the appropriate regulators to do the needful in such a way that we have the desired result. So it's encouraging, and I know that that is in the medium term. In the long term, that is in the short run. In the short term, in the medium and long term, the way to go will still be for us to continue with this engagement and dialogue. We need to incorporate virtual meetings and some of this development in our newcomer bill. Also, we have the economic stimulus bill currently at the National Assembly. We would like all the regulators, Securities and Exchange Commission, Corporate Affairs Commission, Nigerian Stock Exchange, to come together. This should not be led for CAC alone, or for SEC alone, or for NSC. Yes, this is our market. This is the capital market. Exactly. And the three regulators should be involved actively with their ministers so that we get this thing done once and for all. We do not want to have a newcomer bill in 2020 that will be due for amendment the same day it is released.
Exactly.
Yes.
That is the concern of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators. Let's collate all these issues and let's come together, work together as a body so that we can have the landscape that we deserve.
No problem, sir. So I assure you that if we receive the letter on Monday, because today is Friday, we are going to the weekend now. By Monday, if I receive it, I will even call you and confirm that I have received it.
Okay.
And then our response, if it doesn't come on Monday, I assure you, latest by Wednesday, you will receive our response.
Okay.
The necessary amendments to the guidelines.
I'm grateful for that, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes. So, moderator, please. Okay.
Sorry, President. Let me add that the regulators should not exclude NICOM and CBN.
Okay.
Because one of the things that some of us have also seen, if you also look at, the need for everybody to be involved. So I'll be suggesting that in whatever we'll be doing going forward, those two regulators should also be involved. But for CAC, realizing that it's also given its role, I will plead that one major aspect of the operation that going forward that you must also help with has to be attendance at in-person AGM. For instance, all the Proxy AGM that has been held so far, I'm not too certain that any of your members have attended, especially those of them that are in Lagos, even when you have an office in Lagos. Okay, and I want to use this opportunity to then congratulate Stock Exchange because they've attended literally all of them. SEC has also not done too well in terms of this attendance because the presence of regulators also gives additional confidence to investors. Yes, because what is it that the investor is investing in? He's investing in confidence. If you wear for whatever all of us are wearing, we know what the composition is. But when you're talking about financial information, confidence is one thing that we must not allow to erode our market.
Exactly. So you see, in fact, even if you look at the guidelines, we said we should be invited as observers. Unfortunately, because of the lockdown, most of these meetings were held in Lagos, and I think few will be held in Abuja. But
only one will be held in Abuja.
None was held in Abuja. Most of them were in Lagos, sir. And you know,
only one.
But you have representatives in Lagos as well.
But you see, as NSC, they work. You understand, irrespective of the lockdown in Lagos. But CAC, no, we are completely locked down. It's only these 2 weeks when we are entering the next second week next week, that we're from level 14 and above are coming to work. All our juniors are not even here. So that was why we were unable to attend those meetings. We're even compiling the list of those ones that have already held the meeting here in my department. So that was why we were not able to attend those meetings, because we don't want to send our staff and he will be arrested by the security forces and be arraigned before the mobile courts.
Madam Moderator, if you can just go to the chat room, if there are questions or clarifications that our participants would like to get answers to.
Okay, Mr. President.
Hello, thank you so much, Alhaji. Was super grateful that you were able to still come on this call, and for all the great insight you have provided on what the Corporate Affairs Commission is doing, and also this opportunity to see that we can continue the conversation with you even outside this forum. So thank you so much, sir. We have a bunch of questions from our participants, and the central thrust for me is that a lot of us want to know what the next steps will be regarding the KAMA bill and what your position will be on all the things that we have discussed this morning, how they are going to be reflected. I know that you've spoken around it, but we just want, as a parting shot from you, your final take on this. What is the way forward for the new KAMA bill?
Well, as far as we are concerned, you know, the 8th Assembly had passed it into law, but unfortunately, you know, when it was circulated to the stakeholders, some stakeholders raised an objection pursuant to the provisions of Section 26, which they felt that the Attorney General should still hold the power of approving companies limited by guarantee. So it had to now be sent back to the National Assembly for an amendment to incorporate the powers of the Federal Attorney General to approve companies limited by guarantee. As it is now, both houses have already passed the law, and it is just awaiting assent.
However, is there any scope then now, given what has just happened, that we also include some of these things that we've talked about, given that now, you know, we've had a situation that has been unprecedented, and it has thrown out to us, you know, the fact that we do need to include some new items in the KAMA bill.
Yes, Madam, you see, even because the KAMA bill is before the Mr. President now for assent, and we had exposed this bill in our website for comments from our stakeholders.
Yes, but
however, even if this is not incorporated in the bill, I assure you that we can now make the minister to exercise his powers under Section 16 to make regulations to cover such meetings, that's virtual meetings and other things like this.
Okay.
It can
along the same point made by Mrs. Ademola, because I could see from what Alhaji had just said that maybe there could be challenge since the bill is currently before the president. However, what about the economic stimulus bill at the National Assembly? That one is still with the Senate. Can't something be done now so that at least we have a law in place to cover some of the issues that are being incorporated based on our experiences regarding COVID-19?
Sir, it's possible, but I'm not even aware of that bill, sir.
Okay, it's at the National Assembly.
Yes, it is.
It's at the National Assembly.
Sir, what you will do is, why don't you collaborate with FSS 2020, who are just our neighbors here?
Okay. That's also, yes.
Yes, that is doable, but also we need the support of the regulatory agencies. It will be nice.
All the full backing. The only thing that we are saying, I think, to incorporate it into the KAMA bill is almost late.
It's late.
Before the president for assent now.
Okay, so let us work together, SEC, Corporate Affairs Commission, Nigerian Stock Exchange. Let's work together to at least incorporate this. And the reason why this is very important is that we do not want a situation whereby in future, God forbid, if we have something close to COVID-19 in future, we should not be raising the same complaint to say it was not envisaged. At least the one we know now, with this massive impact on corporate meetings, we should be in a position to incorporate them in any proposed bill at the moment, so that we know that should that happen in future, it could be regional, maybe something that is peculiar to a particular region, and they could not hold their corporate meetings. That we know we are covered, and as much as possible, we should do what is expected of us.
Thank you so much, my president. We will just start rounding up this meeting now. I would like to take the parting shot from both Mrs. Braimoh. I'll take hers first, and then we can move on to Mr. Ayeku. Braimoh.
Thank you very much. My final words will be, we should continue to collaborate, speak with each other when these things come up so that we find solutions. And since the gentleman from CAC has said that it's almost impossible to include in the bill for KAMA, these virtual meetings, then we should explore including it in the economic stimulus bill, because that would solve those problems that we have right now. And for the investors, which SEC is there to protect, we would say that if you have any complaints concerning these procedures that Mr. Hakeem have already detailed out in holding your AGMs, we are ready to listen, we're ready to help. For investors, we have a rule in our rule book, which says that, I'll just read it out, concerning this proxy AGMs. If for any reason they have a complaint concerning the proceedings of these companies that have already held their AGMs as regards representation, they can make such complaints to the Commission. And we have the powers to request for these proxy forms to determine indeed if their interests were represented at such meetings. It's in our rules and regulations. So I would just, my last word is we'll cooperate and make sure that one way or the other we would overcome these hurdles at this time. I don't think it will always be like this forever, but we have to put our heads together for now to ensure that public companies are at their best. There's good corporate governance even in these times, and everybody is doing what they need to do at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Braimoh. Thank you for that assurance that we should continue to collaborate as operators as well as regulators. I'd like to call Ms. Ayeku to also give us a parting shot. Ms. Ayeku, please.
Thank you very much. I think Mrs. Braimoh has actually said it all. I think we need to continue to collaborate, and I think, just the way that the meeting started and the way that it has ended, you can already see that when you judge, it's much better. So you already see a way, at least the beginning of a way through to some of the concerns. We should continue like this. I think the people the regulated entities also need to realize that they are the ones that run their companies. And so if you don't talk to the regulators and let the regulators know what your issues are, it's not necessarily that the regulators don't care. It's just that that issue may not have occurred to them because they're in a different space than you. And I would really like everyone to use this opportunity that everyone online has said, look, we're open. This is a new area. It's a new challenge. Let's all listen to one another and, try to find a way out. I can't stop without talking about the fact that we're very interested in ensuring that there's good governance, even at this point. And so, because I know that there are a lot of representatives of listed companies on the call, we want to ensure that investors do not feel at the end of this that, a lot of things were smuggled through, or the regulators were asleep at the switch while trying to survive COVID, or the companies were doing whatever they want, thinking that COVID will cover a multitude of sins. And so I just think that it's important to state that as well. So we have to ensure that even in this situation, we do things as much as possible in line with global best practice, but also in line with Nigerian law. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Awe. We really appreciate that. Open dialogue, transparency, and of course, we should continue to run our businesses ethically. Thank you so much. Abidemi, your final word, please.
I think for me is just to say thank you very much to our regulators. The responsibility of upholding corporate governance is a common goal that we all have, and preserving the stability of our companies or organizations. So it's really delightful to see that we have regulators that are willing to listen, and they're really willing to also change, what they've put down, to say, I haven't listened, we feel we can change. So that's really gratifying. And I think as we continue this week, we'll all forge a way ahead that, preserves our corporate governance framework, and that, represents the interest or supports the interest of both the investors, the companies, and even the regulators as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abidemi. Let me call on Mr. Awo to also give us his final word.
Okay, I first must thank the Institute for inviting me to share in this discussion. But since I also know that there are quite a number of company secretaries on this platform, it will be important to also state that no market will exist without investors. Yet, your loyalty should not only be to the company. It's important that efforts are made both on individual and on a collective basis to make sure that the average shareholder is not just being seen as being protected, but must be protected. And I think that also extends to SEC to some extent, because one of the things you hear, if you feel offended, just write. Very many persons won't write. But what you then hear in terms of murmuring does much bigger damage to any market. So I will continue to encourage us as companies to please do the needful. Again, without mentioning names, quite a number of company secretaries think that their loyalty is one and only to the board. And even in some things, not just to one person. And I don't think that will help the development of companies in Nigeria. Because come to think of it, a number of those companies that are listed in Nigeria started just like a number of private companies are also starting in Nigeria. And the more that we encourage them to do well, corporate governance right, funding right, they can also become multinationals in other nations tomorrow. So it's important that we take this, while not unmindful of the threats to job loss. But one of the things I've also told people, you lose a job today, certainly another job will come tomorrow. But what is much more important is that we must make sure that our conscience is one that we're setting that will help to run any system and run it well. Once again, I want to thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Awo. Thank you. We hear you. You've always spoken to us, and then we'll continue to listen and be guided. Thank you so much. I would also like to call our chief host to give us a parting word. Mr. President, please.
It is my pleasure once again to thank all the participants, particularly the representatives of the regulatory agencies. Ms. Tinu representing the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Mrs. Braimoh representing the Securities and Exchange Commission, Mr. AbdulHakeem representing the Corporate Affairs Commission, Mrs. Ademola representing the listed companies, and our good friend, Mr. Nomah representing the investors. It is gladdening to hear from our regulatory agencies that they are willing to listen and they are flexible. And also, I listened to the charge from them that we should also not suffer in silence. If we have any issue of interest, we should contact them so that they can look at it jointly. And we've seen once again the benefits of coming together to deliberate on an issue. The problem, I would say, is solved now, and I can assure you that the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria will use this weekend to collate all the issues and send our letter on behalf of stakeholders to the Corporate Affairs Commission. And I'm happy that we have the assurance that we get a quick response. Once again, it is important to know that the Institute of Chartered Secretary is in Nigeria to support best corporate governance practices. I will continue to also gauge the mood of stakeholders, collate their views, and as much as possible interface with the relevant agencies of government to ensure that those views and concerns are addressed as soon as possible. And so we'll be there as the hub of corporate governance professionals to represent all the stakeholders to take up all the corporate governance issues. And that is why we appeal to all participants. If you have any clarification to seek on corporate governance matters or on this particular issue, feel free to contact the Institute, and I'm very sure that we'll be there to support you. So on that note, I thank the moderator, Mrs. Abiola Laseinde, for another successful outing. I thank all the participants. I wish all of you, including myself, a very great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to all of our panelists and our participants. Please take note that there will be a communique that will be published on our website, www.icsan.org, after this meeting, as well as the letter and all the communication will be sent to the Corporate Affairs Commission and the other regulators.